Hello everyone who watches these videos for some reason or another. Today I'm working on an Alcatel. This one was actually donated to us by a customer because we are not able to get replacement parts for this one at our location. And as a result, he didn't want to hold on to it anymore for some reason. It is water damaged and the screen is cracked. I went ahead and removed the back panel of it. And as you can see, the water damage indicator has been tripped right there, and you'll also find there's some corrosion that's been built up on the vibrate motor right there, and some very strange staining over this chip shield. There's a few other spots around the board that look to be a little bit damaged as far as liquid goes, and I believe that the customer did say it was pool water, so chlorine, which does start to corrode almost instantly, is not your friend. So let's go ahead and disassemble this one and see if we can't figure out if it's repairable at all. I'm going to unplug the fingerprint scanner right there, and I'm actually going to remove this little shield. This plastic shield appears to be covering our battery connector. Our battery connector needs to be unplugged, even though this battery is likely already very, very dead. And right underneath the fingerprint scanner, immediately we see some minor corrosion build up right there as well. Just a little bit of corrosion on that resistor and a little bit on that probe point. So let's keep digging in. Keep digging in. Get that battery unplugged right there. Get it out of the way. We're going to peel off a little bit of this Captain tape that's holding on the what I can only assume is the LCD connection. The LCD connection usually has that larger, wider one. Immediately I'm noticing something interesting. The LCD connector, as you can see, is slightly unplugged. That little bit of white showing there and then covering up there, so it means that it's gone in at more of an angle this way. For all intents and purposes, that could actually be the issue. However, once we unplug it, now we see some more issue. We see there is quite a bit of corrosion on that connector. We could probably clean that up, possibly just reflow it onto it. But there's also some corrosion on the flex connection itself that we can likely clean up a little bit with some alcohol, maybe some flux. All right, let's carry on. We've got a very interesting thing here. This is a flex connection that is not just plugged in and then taped over. It is plugged in, taped over, clipped in, and screwed on to the board itself. Now this is just the flex connection for the power, volume up, and volume down buttons. Why this would be screwed into the board, I can't even think of a reason, considering all the other effort that they put into keeping it down. What with clipping it in, taping it over. Let's get that out of the way. Did we just rip that? Oh, interesting. It was actually not screwed in by that screw. That is simply a little niblet with some glue on it. Very, very weird. Very weird. All right, let's keep going. Got our antenna connection right here. You can see that the antenna connection is actually routed along the side chamber in the board, and it runs all the way down to where the antennas are actually on the phone at the very bottom there. Kind of interesting little design. Let's go ahead and remove the rest of these screws out of the board. Sorry for the autofocusing. Is wide angle any better? Ever so slightly. Ever so slightly. Let's get the rest of these screws out of here. It's more than likely, if water found its way into this phone, it also found its way under these shields, probably under the board as well. I'm not keeping a super great screw map going. Simply because all of these are Phillips heads. They're all the same thread count, length, everything else. Alcatel is one of the nicer manufacturers that keeps things kind of standard there. Though I'm not a huge fan of Alcatel phones, if you're looking to buy a new one, I do not recommend them unless you are on an incredibly tight budget. They do not hold up quite as well as other phones. The quality in manufacturing just isn't really there on Alcatel and ZTE, some other manufacturers like that. So unless you're on a budget, I don't recommend this one. I believe that this one was on one of those one-off carriers like Mint or Chit Chat or something weird, Total Freedom Wireless. Interestingly, I'm noticing that there are two different size screws right here. These two are the same length, but they're different lengths than the rest of the screws that I've found throughout the board. I'm going to keep them slightly separated, though like I said, this phone is technically in our recycle. It is not in line to be fixed. The customer is not expecting it to be fixed. We're just taking a look to learn a little bit more about phones, how they work, and how they're put together. Regardless of if we can fix something or not, it is very important to learn how something works. It's very important to keep learning. Just never stop learning throughout your life. The knowledge that you gain can not just help yourself, but you can help a lot of other people through it. The knowledge of electronics repair, with consumer electronics being so common these days, and also being made of fragile materials like glass and aluminum, it can definitely help somebody who's in a pinch who doesn't have that knowledge if you have that knowledge. Knowledge is a very powerful thing. And like I said, I've actually never disassembled one of these before. I'm going in completely blind, but I'm basing it off of the knowledge from other phones that I've taken apart. This guy right here is our headphone jack. So, you know how Apple says that they can't fit the headphone jack in the iPhone 7 anymore? Well, hold on a second. I've actually got an iPhone 7 that I can show you. Give me one moment. So this right here is the frame of an iPhone 7. This is one that we use for training purposes and testing purposes, and as a result, it does not have a screen, and the internals are not in the greatest of shape. However, it can show you what I want to teach you here. And at the very bottom of your iPhone 7, the first one without the headphone jack, you will find your speaker module right here, which of course comes out of those vents at the bottom like they always have on the iPhone. But over here where your other speaker is, where the headphone jack would be, what's behind it? Absolutely nothing. This right here is a microphone. This right here is a plastic bracket that is actually covering that small flex connection right there. It plugs into the bottom here. That flex connection is for your Taptic engine. That's your vibrate motor. So what actually goes on down here? A whole lot of nothing. A headphone jack? Could it go here? Could a headphone jack go in here? Now, let me just show you this. Not only does the headphone jack look like it would fit there, it looks like it would fit within tolerances as well, right behind that Taptic engine. So, why did iPhone and Apple remove the headphone jack when they're small, tiny, and honestly don't even need to be this large? They just need the metal connections on the side there. Why take it out? Can't answer that one. You're on your own. So let's get back to working on this Alcatel phone, a phone that is more feature-rich than Apple's flagships. We're continuing to tear down the phone. We've got most of the components out of the board. Looks like we've got all of the motherboard screws out as well. So this board should be relatively free to pop up. ZTE and other phone manufacturers tend to clip it in using the mid-frame of the phone, and that holds the board in rather than just having an obnoxious amount of screws. Oddly enough, the Samsung Galaxy S8 was the last Samsung that did not have the board screwed in. The charge ports have always been screwed in several places, usually about 4 or 5 Phillips screws holding the Samsung charge ports, but their boards have always been free floating and actually held in by a minor bit of adhesive and mostly the pressure from other flex connections and other components inside the phone. But with the Galaxy S9 and so on, they've actually began to screw it in. The Galaxy S9 board is held in by two Phillips head screws. Feels like our board is loose now. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. Something is holding it in from underneath, but I feel like it is actually this selfie camera. And I was right. It's a small Lego connection, so we can pop that right off. Now that we're tearing this one down, let's unplug this main flex right there. That actually connects the charge port down here, which is a daughter board, all the way up top to the motherboard. The daughter board controls a few things. Looks like it's controlling the vibrate motor, cellular antenna, charging the loudspeaker, and that seems to be about it on this one. Boy, I'm sorry guys, I had to step away to help a customer and I cannot for the life of me remember what I was talking about beforehand. So let's continue on with this repair, disassembly, whatever you want to call it. It looks like at the bottom here near the charge port, actually the only corroded piece is that mass vibrating motor. I'm wondering if, you know, I'm not even gonna really mess with it. I'm thinking that one's fine. Doesn't appear to be any damage inside that USB type C, so I think we're in the clear on that. I think the charge port might actually be good on this one. Might have just been the main board that got affected, but that corrosion down there is concerning. I bet I could just pop this board right up and we'll see if it's got any corrosion on it. I don't recognize this symbol. What is this? Look at that little thing. What the heck is that? Is that a cockroach? What symbol is that? Very interesting. I'm also not familiar with what this round cap on there is, unless that's a microphone. Could be a microphone on that one. Yep, most definitely a microphone actually. It actually sits in this little slot right here, and it's got an opening, and that's one reason that a lot of people think that if you stick something pointy into that hole, it'll fry your microphone. This is not the case. You can push right in there and it's not going to do anything. Your microphone is all on this side. It actually gets pressed against there, so really no risk of accidentally poking through. Now that we got the charge port out though, let's take a closer look at that and we'll find that, oh boy, it's missing some pins, or it never had them in the first place. Getting some minor corrosion down there. Nothing too serious. That's not too bad. Alright. Let's plug this bad boy back in. Let's go take a look at this board. See if we can't see anything off. I mean, aside from the giant corrosion marks. SIM tray definitely had a little bit of water ingress in there. And some of the shields up top, like they've got it. What is this mess going on up there though? That does not look good. That does not look good at all. I wonder if we could clean that up with a little bit of flux and a little bit of hot air. SIM tray's not looking too nice. Let's get these cameras out of here. The cameras, while they are in the same assembly, are two separate modules actually. And neither of these cameras, if I recall, actually this one right here, I believe has, nope, no optical stabilization. And definitely no optical on that one. That one's usually the wide angle sensor. Most wide angle sensors don't have optical stabilization because there's no need. And if it did, it might actually make the video look slightly distorted and warped. Unplug those camera modules. I don't think I can get under those shields very nicely. They don't have any pick points really. They do have a small opening right there. My tweezers are not fine enough to get in there, and the ones I have that are would bend. Alright, before we go stabbing too much, before we go too stab happy on this one, I'm going to go try and clean up the board. Don't worry, you're coming with me, and we're going to see what we can find. Alright, we've got our zoom lens attached, and I apologize, there is some vignetting on the edges of it. That's just because you're clipping a lens onto another lens, so it's a little tricky. Let's go ahead and see if we can't clean up that area at all. I'm going to use some hot air. And I'm going to use a little bit of flux. Just enough. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. We are back yet again. Another customer had a bit of a charge port issue in his iPhone. Wouldn't you know, it was jam-packed with lint. Well, moving on. Let's cook this thing. We're just cleaning off all that corrosion, all that nasty stuff. And simultaneously, we may be reflowing these chips a little bit. Let's make sure our chips are reflowing. Got a little bit of movement, a little bit of play. I think we'll call that good there. I'll clean that board up in the ultrasonic here in just a little bit. Let's check out some more spots that... There was one other spot on here I noticed earlier that looked a little suspect. Is it on this side? No, nothing really suspect there. Let's see if we can't clean up that LCD connection a little bit. Grab our nice soldering iron, which honestly isn't all that nice. Just gonna give this one, maybe two little passes. Just trying to clean off a little bit of that corrosion, make sure that those pins are all attached. Alright, let's wipe this board down. Those pins are looking much better, much happier pins at the bottom there, as Mr. Rossman would say. Very, very happy pin connectors. Let's check out the other side. Beautiful. Wipe up a little bit of that flux, get that corrosion out of this board. Take off that little protective flex. There's another microphone right there. Alright, I'm happy with that. I know there's still some staining on it, but we're gonna drop it in the ultrasonic cleaner, and that should take care of that for us. Let's check it out. Alright, we're over here at the ultrasonic cleaner. We're gonna drop that board in and get ready for the most god-awful noise you've heard on a microphone today. Isn't that peaceful? Now the peaceful sound is over. Let's go ahead and remove the board, and we'll take a look and see if we got some of that corrosion off of it. There it is. It's definitely a little bit shinier. Still didn't get that staining off. I could probably scrape that off, but the goal was to get most of the flux out of there. Toasty. Alright, we're going to stick this in the dehydrator and let it dry out. And we'll come back in a moment. Alright, so while I wait for that board to dry, I wanted to show you a few more things on this phone that are just mostly interesting to me. Not really anything to do with this repair, just more about the phone's design. As you'll see up here, there's this cool looking blue gel like sticker. This little guy is a heat sink actually. This is what absorbs the heat from the main processor on the phone and kind of dissipates it so it's not constantly just cooking. We've got a water damage indicator here, which is kind of a half tripped, which is a little strange. Most of the time it trips either all the way or not at all. We have a hole right here, which I'm not really sure. I think something might fit in there on the board, but that right there is actually the back of our screen. That is the backlight panel right below. So there's some minor corrosion going on. Our front-facing camera is still good. The connector is a little dirty on one side, but fine on the other. I have not yet cleaned up this screen connection. Let's see if I can't clean that up real quick. Gonna grab our booze. Now, for the heavier stuff, we would be using Booze Plus, but today we're just gonna be using regular booze. Booze up that connector. I'm gonna grab a terrible looking toothbrush and I'm going to clean that connector. Now, there are still some slight scorch marks down there, but I don't believe that they're going to have too much effect, as the board is for the most part clean and doesn't appear to be bridged. Those areas look just a little dirty more than anything else. They are just a little dirty. So I'm rubbing this down. I'm not going to scratch it. Just giving a little bit of surface work to kind of reveal some of those pads that are hidden away under this black soot, corrosion, whatever. Always a good idea to take a sharp metal object and poke things that are around the battery or laying on top of the battery, like in this case. Don't do this. Alright. Let's go grab the board. We're going to plug it back in, and we're going to see if we get any sign of life out of this. I doubt it, but we're going to try. We are back with our newly dried board, and while there are still some stains on there and minor marks that look like corrosion or vomit, most of the areas that were affected that we were after have been cleaned up. So that LCD connector is nice and clean now. That mess of whatever was up there has been cleaned up now. So let's go ahead and put this guy back in, and we're going to see what it does inside the phone. Going to plug in the cameras. There's really no need for it, but some phones are a little bit particular. They don't like to boot up unless all components are in there. And when I say some phones, I mean anything that's not Android. Android doesn't seem to care. This phone is Android, yes, I know. But I'm going to do this just because once I put this back together, I really don't feel like taking this phone apart again. I want to be done with this phone. It was fun when I started the video. It's no longer fun. I don't know why. It's just no longer fun. But we're learning, and learning is fun. Let's reconnect that nice little selfie camera. Another selfie camera that does not have optical image stabilization. However, it's very rare that selfie cameras do. Samsung, again, toting the Samsung horn here, they did add stabilization in, I believe, the Note series for their front-facing cameras, possibly the S9 Plus, maybe the S9. I know that the S10 does seem to lack that image stabilization. Remember when we had that LCD connector beforehand and it was coming out of the board a little bit there? We've now reseated that all the way. Nothing to plug in underneath. We'll lay the board back down. Oh, you're right, I did forget. We do need to plug this guy in to the bottom of the board. There we go. Let's go ahead and lay this back down. Right where he belongs. Come on. Come on. Just pop in there. Come on. Alcatel, please. Be nice. Thank you, Alcatel. Got that clip back in. Let's reattach this antenna connector at the top there. Let's reattach our camera, or I'm sorry, volume and power flex. I've already reattached the camera. I'm getting ahead of myself. Or behind myself? Who knows? Who cares? We'll plug in our headphone jack, very top there. Come on. There he is. He's a nice little guy. Plug right in there. Our battery connector is not looking too spectacular. There's kind of a giant hole in there. I don't know what that's from, but it looks like it should still connect just fine. We will clip this back in here. I say it should fit in just fine. There we go. Much nicer. Now, before even fully reassembling the phone, I'm going to stick the fingerprint reader on there. Fun fact, if you change the fingerprint sensor on your iPhone, it will no longer read fingerprints. It will no longer work as a home button. It will no longer work, period, because Apple. However, on a Samsung, if your Samsung device is currently on, you're using it, and you unplug that fingerprint reader and plug in a completely different one, your phone will be ready to read fingerprints all over again, because you're not changing anything. You're changing the lock, and the lock still takes the same key. However, if you change the key, it won't open that lock anymore, and that's how Apple designs things. I'm going to go grab the USB Type-C connector. I've got this plugged into an amp meter that's slightly out of view for you guys. I'm sorry about that. I just don't have a long enough cable at the moment. Plug that in, and what do we get? We are pulling 0.19 amps of current going through this phone. What does that mean for us? Well, a couple things actually. Pulling 0.9 means that part of the phone is working. It means that the charge port is working, but it also means that the phone does not see the battery. The phone does not see a battery for it to charge. It doesn't know where that power needs to go. As a result, the phone does nothing. It will not power on. Let's try pressing the power button. See what it does. I apologize again, everyone. I continue to be interrupted, but that's part of the job. So anyway, as we were testing out the power button on this guy. And just got to vibrate. And we do have an LED at the top. That being said, it looks like this phone may actually be fixable after all. It would just need a replacement screen on there. So yeah, that's basically how you would clean up water damage off of this Alcatel, and then you would just need to replace the screen and you'd have a working phone again. So thanks for joining me, guys. I hope you learned something about taking apart phones and possibly how they work, and that water damage is not always a death sentence. Leave a comment below and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks, everyone.